So, can you give us an overview of the literary structure of the Quran?
Yeah, that's a tough question. The literary structure of the Quran. First thing to note is, and this is any of you that are any of the audience also that's familiar with an appreciation of literature, they know that all literature is unique, and its merits should not be judged in comparison to other literature. Every literature should be judged on its own merits. And when you come to the Quran from that point of view, you'll realize that the Quran is in fact unique and unprecedented in many, many, many ways. First and foremost, the Quran was revealed not in the form of literature, it was revealed in the form of speech that takes place over the course of 23 years. And so what we call the Quran now as a book, is something different from what the first audience experienced. They experienced speech, and now we're calling it literature. And usually speech and literature are two very different things. The way you speak is not the way you write. And that's part of the miraculous beauty of the Quran, that even though it was revealed in the form of speech, when it is put in the form of a book, it has remarkable literary qualities. It is not sequenced or structured by subject. It's not sequenced or structured by chronology. It's not sequenced or structured by size order, meaning the earlier surahs. We don't call them chapters, we call them surahs, by the way. So it's not like the larger surahs are first and the smaller surahs are last. That's not the case either. So at first glance, it seems like there is no literary structure. It seems like it's all just, a random change of subjects and topics. But this has actually been an area of focus and inquiry and research for Muslim scholars for centuries, exploring the remarkable, unique literary sequencing of the Quran. And this is actually a really amazing study. And unfortunately, one of the tragedies of Western audiences, or English-speaking audiences even in the Muslim world, not being exposed to the literary marvel of the Quran and how incredibly intricate it is as literature, this area of the appreciation of the Quran hasn't gotten much attention, mostly because even the Muslim world is now oblivious, for the most part, to the study of the Arabic language and literary appreciation in general. So all we do have of the Quran is very shallow translation, and in shallow translation it does seem like the text is chaotic and it's shifting and it's going in different directions. But there are one of my projects also is to kind of explore and highlight, in English at least, the literary cohesion of the Quran, how coherent it is. There are some good books written in English as of late also on this topic, but it is something to be explored, and it's not something that can be really understood casually.
So, do you think that Quran can be translated exactly like the Quran as an Arabic language?
I don't believe that the Quran can be translated. I think a droplet of the meaning or some sense of the meaning can be communicated when you're trying to translate the Quran. But I say that for religious reasons, obviously, because we're talking about divine speech. In the end, the translation is the words of a human being, and from our theological point of view, we're talking about the words of God being compared to the words of human. How can there ever be a comparison? A great scholar, Suyuti, in trying to describe this disparity between translation or the word of human beings as opposed to the word of Allah, the word of God, he said, just as though there is an infinite distance between the Creator and the creation, just as much is there a difference between the word of the Creator and the word of creation. So from that point of view, yes, we can translate it, but we have to be a little more precise, beyond the religious sense. Every literature, like good literature or great works of any language, like poetry or great essays and things like that, when they're translated into another language, something is lost. The creative power, the essence of it, the heart of it, something the original audience felt is not able to be communicated to an audience in translation. Something is lost. So from that point of view, the creative power of the Quran is lost when we're translating. That's one thing. The other is the Arabic language, as I mentioned earlier, is very, very rich. So a word can embed in itself several meanings. But a translator is trying to communicate one statement in the Quran with one statement in English or French or German or Urdu or whatever else. So he or she has much less of an opportunity to communicate that message that is communicated in much richer and more comprehensive form. So I don't believe in translation as much, but I do believe there's a need for a literary analysis in which the author at least has an opportunity to get a little deeper into the language and explain all the word plays and all the intricacies that are going on in the text. So instead of reducing the act of translation from one statement in the Qur'an to one statement in English or any other language, it should really be a passage or a discussion about that one thing. And so that's something that I believe can be done and should be done.